Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Alexander Marston. I was 38 years old when I received a text message that changed the course of my entire life. Not a call. Not a face-to-face meeting. Not even an email with some half-baked HR language. No. It was a text. And it hit my phone just as Rafael Nadal was tossing the ball for his championship serve at Roland Garros. I was courtside, sitting in the kind of luxury seats most people only dream about. Paris was buzzing. The air felt alive with tension and triumph. I was supposed to be celebrating. Instead, my phone buzzed. Pathetic employees like you don't deserve success. Then another. You're fired. Clean out your desk by Monday. The messages came from Riley Vaughn, my boss at Betrayal Consulting Group. Chicago-based. Tech strategy. Profitable. Competitive. And now, the place that had just tossed me out like expired milk after 6 years of grinding. 6 years. 6 years of flying back and forth across the Atlantic, sleeping in hotel rooms more than in my own bed, missing birthdays, anniversaries, and even my mom's funeral service because Riley needed me to take a can't-miss call with a German CEO. I was the reason our European division even existed. When I joined, they had 0 clients abroad. Just a dream and a sales deck. I built it, brick by brick, client by client. I learned French, then German. Flew out on red ice, sealed deals over midnight espresso shots, and signed contracts that paid for Riley's beach house and golf club memberships. And now? Now I was disposable. I stared at the phone, but the words didn't make sense. Was this a prank? A mistake? Then I remembered who Riley Vaughn was. A coward. The kind of man who shook your hand with one hand and had a knife in the other. I'd seen him fire 3 team leads the same way, cold, distant, transactional. But I never thought it would be me. You all right? A calm voice beside me asked. I turned. The man was older, well-dressed, with a face I vaguely recognized. Then it hit me like a freight train. Julian Crane. CEO of Arventus Global, our biggest rival in Europe. I'd seen him on a panel in Frankfurt. He was everything Riley wasn't, composed, strategic, and respected across the Atlantic. Just, work, I said. I pocketed my phone and tried to focus on the match, but my mind was elsewhere. My career had just been cut off mid-sentence. And no one even said goodbye. But as Nadal raised his arms in victory and the crowd erupted in cheers, a new thought entered my mind. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Riley Vaughn had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and I was sitting next to the one man who could help me prove it. The crowd roared. But to me, it felt like a vacuum, like someone had sucked the air out of the world. My mouth was dry. My hands were cold. I sat there frozen while Rafael Nadal hoisted the trophy to the sky. And all I could think about was the absurdity of it all. 6 years. 6 damn years. And I didn't even get a phone call. I had missed my daughter's piano recital in Zurich to finalize a contract Riley later took full credit for. I worked through the flu in Berlin to secure a deal with Gruntech that Riley used to boost his quarterly performance review. I'd sacrificed vacations, time with my wife, time with myself, just to make Verexen's European division a cornerstone of the company's growth. And now I was just, gone. It hit harder than I expected. Because I didn't just lose a job. I lost an identity. A rhythm. A routine. A purpose. Julian Crane was still seated beside me, watching the post-match interviews. I could feel his eyes flick toward me again, but he said nothing. Smart man. He knew silence was safer when someone was bleeding internally. I didn't say a word as the stadium began to clear. Outside, Paris glowed with the golden hue of an early summer evening. The city of love. Of beauty. Of dreams. And I was walking through it like a ghost. I found a café. Sat down. Ordered a scotch, neat. Then another. The weight of the betrayal finally landed when I opened the text again. I read it over and over. Pathetic employees like you don't deserve success. The cruelty of that sentence was deliberate. Riley wanted me to feel worthless. This wasn't a sudden decision. He'd planned it. Waited for me to be out of the country. Away from my team. Powerless. That's when I remembered Catherine, my wife. Weeks earlier, she'd warned me. He's setting you up, Alex. He's bringing in his nephew for a reason. Men like Riley don't make moves like that without an endgame. I brushed it off at the time. Told her she was being paranoid. But she had seen it before I did. Riley's nephew, Brandon, was a 25-year-old MBA brat who barely knew how to pronounce Schweizerische Bundesbahnen, let alone understand Swiss compliance culture. And yet Riley hired him to shadow me across all major accounts in Europe. Now I knew why. The Paris trip was never a reward. It was a smokescreen. I sat in that café until the waiter gently asked if I needed anything else. He meant well. I probably looked like a man trying not to cry into his drink. And maybe I was. I walked the city for hours that night, aimless. Ended up by the Seine, staring at the water like it held answers. What was I supposed to do now? Catherine called as I sat on a bench near Pont Neuf. I didn't want to answer. I couldn't. But I did. Hey, she said. Softly. Like she already knew. I got fired, I croaked. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, I'm so sorry, Alex. That cracked something inside me. I didn't cry, not really. But my breath hitched. My chest tightened. I felt the dam threatening to break. How? Text. While I was watching the match. Jesus. I should have seen it coming. I should have listened to you. Forget what I said. That man is garbage. You deserved better. But that didn't help. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like I deserved anything. I felt like a fool. After we hung up, I sat there for another hour. I thought about Brandon sitting at my desk. I thought about Riley smirking as he told the board I had burned out. And I thought about everything I had given up for a company that couldn't even fire me face to face. I wasn't just angry. I was ashamed. Ashamed I had been so blind. Ashamed I hadn't protected myself. Ashamed that I let a man like Riley take so much of me. That night, I returned to my hotel and stared at the ceiling until morning. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't sure what yet. But it was cold, quiet, and growing stronger. By breakfast, it had a name. Not rage. Not hate. Something sharper. More focused. Resolve. Because if Riley thought I was going to go quietly into the night, he had no idea who I really was. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. By the time I flew back to Chicago, the grief had calcified into something harder. I was still reeling, yes, but I wasn't stumbling anymore. I walked off that plane with one goal, figure out what Riley was really up to. Because this wasn't just personal. It was calculated. You don't fire your top international strategist via text on a Sunday night in Paris unless you're hiding something. You don't install your useless nephew in someone's seat unless you're preparing for something bigger. So I started connecting dots. Quietly. First, I contacted my lawyer, Marissa Young. She'd helped me renegotiate my original Virexin contract 3 years ago, and I trusted her like family. I need you to dig into my non-compete clause, I said. Every detail. She paused. Why? I think I'm about to make Riley Vaughn regret his entire career. That got her attention. She reviewed the contract and called me back later that evening. Good news, she said. Your non-compete only covers direct competitors operating within a 50-mile radius of Verexon's Chicago office. If you're working for a European-based company and not actively soliciting current clients, you're in the clear. What if the clients come to me? Then it's not solicitation, it's loyalty. And that's not enforceable. I exhaled. That night, I made 2 lists. List A, my core European clients, the ones I had personally nurtured for years. The ones who took my calls at midnight, who invited me to their kids' weddings, who trusted me, not Verexon, with their systems, security, and futures. List B, the clients Riley would try to retain by pretending nothing had changed. He was in for a rude awakening. But something still didn't sit right. The timing. The travel. The way I was fired. So I made one more call, to the one person still inside the walls of Verexon who had always treated me fairly. Patricia Wells. HR Director. Smart. Cautious. Had been there since before Riley. She answered on the 3rd ring. Alexander. I need to talk. Confidentially. There was a pause. Then, meet me at the cafe on Fulton. Noon tomorrow. She was already ahead of me. I showed up early and watched the door. When Patricia arrived, she didn't even order coffee. She just sat down and said, I knew something was wrong when I saw the timing. What timing? You're firing. Riley pushed it through while you were in Europe, knowing full well that the HR packet was post-dated, and that Brandon's employment records were being backdated to look like he'd already been on board months ago. That confirmed it. The whole thing was staged. But why? I asked. What's the rush? Why not just fire me properly? Patricia looked around, leaned forward, and dropped the real bomb. Because Riley is trying to sell the European client list. My stomach dropped. Sell it? To who? A firm in Berlin. He's been in talks with them for a while, about offloading the entire European division. He wants to spin it as a profitable, turnkey acquisition. Your firing was part of cleaning house. Jesus Christ, I whispered. She nodded. He knew the clients were loyal to you. So he had to get rid of you before finalizing the deal, make it look like you were leaving anyway, or that you were unstable. That's why Brandon's name is already listed on internal records as the Director of European Relations. Riley's selling the division like you never existed. I felt sick. The years I spent building those partnerships, gone. Scrubbed. Erased. Does the board know? I don't think so. Riley's keeping it quiet. He told legal it's just an exploratory deal. And what about Brandon? She gave a cold laugh. The kid thinks he's going to be VP by Christmas. I sat back. Let the weight of it all settle over me. Riley wasn't just cutting me out, he was cashing me in. Selling off the work I'd built like a product line in a warehouse clearance. But that's when I realized something crucial. He'd made one colossal mistake. He thought the clients were part of the asset. But they weren't. They were part of me. European clients don't care about your American job titles. They care about consistency. Trust. Cultural fluency. You don't just swap out a business relationship like a printer cartridge. Riley was about to learn the hard way. Can you get me copies of the transition docs? I asked Patricia. She hesitated. You didn't hear this from me, she said finally. But yes. I nodded slowly. You might want to update your resume too. Just in case. Patricia gave me a look. I already have. That night, I called Julian Crane. You said something about continuing our conversation, I told him. I did. Well, I said. I think I'm ready to talk. Julian Crane wasn't the kind of man who asked a lot of questions. He didn't have to. When I walked into the private dining room of the Langham Hotel in Chicago, he stood, shook my hand firmly, and offered a glass of aged scotch without asking what I'd like. "Alexander," he said, "I've been thinking about your situation since Paris. Then you know why I called." He sat, steepled his fingers, and studied me for a beat. "You're a talented man who was just betrayed by someone who values politics over performance. That kind of mistake tends to correct itself, if guided properly." That was all I needed to hear. We got to work. I laid it out for him. Riley's plan to offload the entire European division to a Berlin-based consulting firm. His cover-up. The forged timelines. The backdated contracts. The quiet disposal of a division that had grown to represent nearly 40% of Virexon's annual revenue. Julian's eyes gleamed. "And you know the clients personally? Better than their families, in some cases. I've closed deals on ski lifts in the Alps and inside German beer halls at midnight. I have the personal cell of every CTO, CEO, and EU legal director on that list." Julian nodded slowly, savoring the implications. "That's not a client list, Alexander. That's a detonator. And I'm ready to light the fuse." We put together a plan. First, I'd officially sign with Arventus Global, Julian's company, as Director of Transatlantic Operations. But my title wouldn't matter nearly as much as what I'd be bringing: trust, relationships, and insider knowledge of Riley's operation. We mapped out the next steps carefully. 1. Legal clearance. My non-compete wouldn't be a problem since Arventus was based in London and didn't maintain a Chicago presence. I wasn't actively soliciting anyone, I was just available. 2. Client prep. I'd draft personal letters to every major client on the European list, informing them discreetly that I was no longer with Virexon, but was continuing operations with Arventus. If they wanted consistency, I'd be there to deliver it. 3. Backdoor verification. Patricia Wells would quietly gather documentation, emails, contracts, even audio files of internal meetings if she could. The more we had on Riley's deception, the more secure we'd be if legal tried to retaliate. 4. Timing. The sale to the German firm wasn't final yet. But once those clients began defecting, that deal would implode. Riley's entire house of cards depended on the illusion that he owned the relationships. Once that illusion cracked. Julian leaned back in his chair. "It's not enough to just expose the truth, Alexander. We need to let it explode in his hands." I smiled. "Don't worry. I've already written the script. He just doesn't know he's in it yet." The next day, I made 3 calls. First was to Klaus Waber at Kristen Tech, our longest-standing client in Zurich. When he answered, he sounded agitated. "Alexander? Finally. Who is this boy Brandon they sent me? He talks like a pamphlet." "I'm no longer with Virexon," I said carefully. "But I've joined Arventus. Same services. Better resources. You'd still be working with me, if that's what you want." There was no hesitation. "Yes. Yes, please. Send me the paperwork. Immediately." Second was Marie Dubois, head of systems at Hollowgate in Lyon. She had been on edge since Brandon's first bumbling attempt to explain their software migration. "I trust you, Alexander," she said flatly. "I don't trust the child Riley shoved into your seat. Send the contracts." Third was Halvor, the stoic Norwegian procurement director for a pharmaceutical giant negotiating a pending $12 million deal. He was cautious. But when I said, "I'll fly to Oslo and meet you face to face," he said only one thing. "Monday. 10 a.m. Bring everything." One by one, the pillars holding Riley's fantasy world began to crack. That weekend, I met with Patricia again. She had everything: time-stamped email records, payroll discrepancies, even a memo where Riley described my departure as amicable and strategic. "Is this enough?" she asked, sliding the flash drive across the table. "It's more than enough," I said. "You just gave me the blueprint to collapse his whole empire." She looked at me with something between admiration and fear. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" I didn't smile. He fired me like I was trash. And now he's trying to profit off of my name. So yes, he's going to feel what it's like to lose everything. By Sunday night, I was back in London. Julian had secured an office, a team, legal backup. And on Monday morning, I walked into a boardroom with one goal. Take it all back. Monday morning in London felt electric. The sky was grey, the air crisp, but inside our Ventus Global's marble-clad boardroom, I was wide awake and alive in a way I hadn't felt in months. No more looking over my shoulder. No more groveling to someone with a title and an inferiority complex. No more being dismissed by a man who thought power came from ownership rather than respect. This was war. And I was already winning. The first volley came at 9:02 a.m., an email from Klaus Waber's legal department formally requesting termination of all contracts with Verexen due to irreconcilable breakdowns in trust and leadership communication. A perfect legal smokescreen. At 9:17 a.m., Marie Dubois emailed a similar letter, copying Verexen's finance director and Riley himself. At 10:05 a.m., the Norwegian pharmaceutical firm's general counsel requested a formal retraction of their negotiations with Verexen, citing structural inconsistencies in executive contact. Translation: Brandon's email signature had a spelling error and the guy couldn't answer a single technical question in their last call. I didn't need to do anything flashy. Just let the house collapse under the weight of its own lies. But I wasn't done. By noon, I had 7 confirmed transfers. Not clients interested in switching, clients who had already signed letters of intent with Arventus and were forwarding contract documentation for immediate onboarding. Julian leaned back in his chair as the emails rolled in. "You weren't exaggerating," he murmured. "They're not just following you. They're fleeing Riley." I gave a tight nod. They never trusted him. He was always the name on the email they ignored. I was the person they knew. The best part? I wasn't even technically violating my non-compete. Not by a legal inch. They were coming to me. By Tuesday morning, I'd received 2 additional requests, both from companies I hadn't even approached. Word was spreading. That afternoon, Patricia Wells called from her personal number. I answered, heart already racing. "Alexander," she said. "You've started a fire." "Good," I said calmly. "I brought marshmallows." She didn't laugh. "Riley is panicking. 3 clients terminated contracts today." Brandon walked out of a meeting crying after Klaus called him a technical houseplant. "The board is starting to ask questions." "And the German firm?" "That's the best part," she said. "They got wind of the client losses and now they're putting the acquisition on hold pending review. If more clients leave, they're pulling out." She paused. "And Alexander, there's more." "Go on." "I found internal emails between Riley and the Berlin firm. He's been feeding them inflated client projections and promising unshakable loyalty from all existing accounts." I leaned forward. "Can you get me copies?" "They're already in your inbox." This was it. Riley had built his plan on a fantasy. He thought the contracts were just ink on paper, numbers in a spreadsheet. He never understood they were human connections. Real trust. Trust he never earned. And now, he was about to lose everything. Wednesday morning, I scheduled 3 in-person meetings in Oslo, Zurich, and Vienna. Not to sell anything. Just to listen. My clients, former clients, spoke openly about how betrayed they felt by Verexen's leadership. About how quickly things unraveled. About how grateful they were that I'd resurfaced. "This isn't just business," Klaus said. "It's a relationship." And Verexen clearly didn't understand that. By Thursday, Julian called me into his office. He was holding a fresh contract, $15 million over 3 years, with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Northern Europe. The same company Riley had been banking on to close his Berlin sale. "Congratulations," he said. "You just killed their only hope of saving face." I took the contract. Studied the numbers. Then said the words I'd been holding in for weeks. "Let's finish him." By Friday morning, Riley Vaughan's world was unraveling. 7 terminated contracts. 2 pending lawsuits. 1 acquisition deal frozen in limbo. And me? I was sitting in a penthouse conference room in Zurich, finalizing a client transfer that was worth more than my entire last year's salary. But just as I prepared to fly back to London for the final phase of the plan, I received a call from Patricia. Her voice was different this time. Shaky. Breathless. "Alexander, you're not going to believe this." "I've believed a lot lately," I said. "Try me." She didn't pause. I was going through archived payroll records. Riley's email forwarding, Brandon's HR file, all of it, just cleaning up loose ends. And there's a company name I kept seeing in the metadata. At first I thought it was a contractor, but I traced it. "Patricia," I said, "what did you find?" "The Berlin firm Riley's been trying to sell the European division to. It's owned by a holding company based in Luxembourg." "Okay. That holding company is registered to a trust. And the sole beneficiary of that trust?" She stopped. "Is Brandon Vaughan." My stomach dropped. "Wait, Brandon. As in his nephew?" "No. Not his nephew, Alex." Silence. "He's Riley's son." I stood up from my chair like I'd been electrocuted. "What?" "They faked the whole nephew story. Riley had Brandon when he was 19. Kept it quiet for years. Never put it on any company record. But he's been grooming him to take over all along. And the Berlin sale? It was never about selling the division. Riley's plan was to offload it to his own son under a separate corporate shell, get the board's approval, collect a sale bonus, and keep control of the whole thing through the back door. I couldn't believe it. He wasn't just replacing me. He was staging a betrayal inside a betrayal. I sank into a chair at the airport lounge, vision tunneling. It was the perfect scam, if no one had looked closely. He cuts me loose, sells the division to an outside firm, and retires with his legacy intact. Brandon inherits the empire under a new name. Everyone thinks it was a legitimate corporate transaction. But the relationships? The clients? They were never part of that fantasy. They were mine. And now, I had proof that Riley hadn't just lied, he'd committed fraud. I called Marissa, my attorney. "Can we go public with this?" "Yes," she said. "But not yet. Let the fallout hit first. Then we burn what's left." That afternoon, I called Klaus, Marie, and Halvor again. This time, I told them the whole truth. Who Brandon really was. What Riley had done. Why their trust was never part of the plan. They were silent for a long time. Then Klaus said, "I want a public statement. From you. And from your new company. You'll have it, I promised." Julian agreed immediately. Within 48 hours, Arventus issued a press release outlining its acquisition of several former Verexen clients. It emphasized the importance of transparency, trust, and continuity, without naming names. But the damage was already done. The moment Patricia leaked the ownership records to a trusted journalist at the Chicago Ledger, the story exploded. CEO secretly transfers company division to hidden son via shell corporation. European clients revolt after discovering fraud in tech firm leadership. Alexander Marston speaks out, they tried to sell my work like it wasn't human. The press came fast and vicious. Verexon's board had no choice. By Tuesday morning, Riley was suspended pending investigation. By Friday, he was fired. But the true blow came when Brandon was publicly exposed, not as a failed nephew, but as the centerpiece of a hidden dynasty. The Berlin deal collapsed. Lawsuits were filed. Verexon's stock plummeted. And Patricia? She resigned, gracefully, and flew to London to meet Julian. She was offered a position that afternoon. As Director of Compliance and Ethics. Poetic, isn't it? As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't dance on the ashes. But I stood taller than I had in months. Because Riley hadn't just tried to ruin my career. He tried to erase my legacy. And I made sure the world knew the truth. 3 weeks after Riley Vaughan's spectacular downfall, I found myself standing outside Verexon's Chicago headquarters, not to return, but to watch it from across the street. The building looked the same. But the name on the lobby plaque had been removed. The company was in free fall. Their stock had plummeted 34%. For European clients had filed breach of contract suits. The board was hemorrhaging executives, desperate to plug the holes in a ship already underwater. Riley? Gone. Not just fired, disgraced. The board's internal audit confirmed everything, the secret shell company, the falsified employment records, the nepotism masquerading as strategy. His nephew had been his secret son all along, and the Berlin sale had been an inside deal to siphon profit and power. They referred him to federal authorities for potential corporate fraud and tax evasion. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled that he had fled to Munich, leaving behind a $6,000 office chair, a barely used MacBook, and a stack of shredded onboarding manuals. It was over. And it wasn't just me who made it happen. It was every client who stood up. Every team member who walked out. Every truth that got dragged out into the light, kicking and screaming. Julian and I flew to Oslo 2 weeks later to finalize a historic 5-country deal worth $28 million over 4 years. The clients we brought over weren't just transfers, they were believers. Believers in something rare in business, loyalty. At Arventis, I wasn't just given a title. I was given a voice. A seat at the table. The trust to lead, not follow. And Patricia? She flourished. She rebuilt the compliance division from the ground up, implementing bulletproof policies and a culture of openness that made sure no Riley type could ever worm their way in again. We joked sometimes, about Riley, about Brandon, about the absurdity of it all. But underneath the laughter was a shared truth. We had survived something poisonous. And turned it into fuel. 6 months after the first text that ended my old life, I stood in the London Arventis office holding a report that made it all feel worth it. Arventis Global, Q3 growth in North American sector, 143%. Client retention rate, 100%. New contracts secured, $52.6 million. We were thriving. Not because we stole anything. But because we built something better. Something honest. That weekend, Catherine joined me at a small townhouse we just closed on in Hampstead. Brick facade. Ivy on the walls. A backyard big enough for a future. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You look lighter." "I feel lighter," I replied. That night, over a bottle of red and the hum of late summer wind, I told her everything, the real details. Not just what happened, but how it felt. The betrayal. The humiliation. The anger. The fear. Then the rebuilding. The vindication. The justice. And the peace that followed. "You know," she said, "I always wondered what would happen if someone ever tried to destroy you." I raised an eyebrow. And she smiled. "Now I know. You rebuild from the ashes and make them regret lighting the match. We laughed. But it was true. Because Riley Vaughn had tried to erase me. And in the end, the only name anyone remembered was mine. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.